You're listening to the Clutter Fairy Weekly, a weekly webcast and podcast brought to you by the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas. If you'd like to participate in one of our live webcasts, please visit cfhou.com/weekly. You'll find a calendar of upcoming webcasts, as well as instructions for joining the Zoom meeting via the app or by phone. We'd love to see you. That URL again is cfhou.com/weekly. Now here's the weekly episode. Enjoy.
Hi, Clutter Fairy fans. This is the Clutter Fairy Weekly for May 27th, 2025. I'm your co-host, Ed Gumnick, and I'm speaking with Gayle Goddard, certified professional organizer and owner of the Clutter Fairy in Houston, Texas.
Hi, everybody. The Clutter Fairy Weekly is the webcast and podcast that digs deep into the clutter that piles up between you and the life you want to be living. We explore the habits and behaviors that lead to clutter, and we suggest strategies to slow the accumulation, reduce the collection, and comfortably manage the stuff we decide to keep.
If you're new to our Zoom meeting, we want to let you know that you can share your questions and comments via the chat feature, and I'll try to make sure Gayle addresses them before we move on to another topic. You can also use the raise hand feature if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment yourself via audio or video. And we are streaming the webcast live on Facebook, so you can share questions and comments there, and I'll relay them to Gayle.
Hi, Facebook.
We're going to start by talking about last week's weekly tittle, which was called Practice Prep for Renovation. The assignment was a thought experiment designed to help you recognize some clutter you've been avoiding or ignoring and find motivation to address it by imagining a renovation project. Let's hear from our participants in Zoom and on Facebook. Who tried our tittle this week? Please let us know in the comments. YouTube viewer The Driftwood Lover shared renovation cautionary tales in a comment on last week's video.
Yes, she did.
Driftwood writes, "Amen to decluttering and packing early. Sometimes contractors show up early. I can share horror stories. One happened to an acquaintance who was putting an addition onto the house along with a small remodel. The couple was at work, expecting the contractor the next day. They came home to find that the contractor had showed up a day early, and since no one was home, he took a saw to the back of the house, cutting through a piece of artwork and making a mess of the master bedroom. Sometimes their other jobs get delayed and they can show up early, so you have to be ready early."
Oh my God. What ridiculous person would saw into the side of a house without thinking about what's on the other side of the wall? That's insane. I'm sorry. Why assume if you come early, the family is ready early? And why cut without being sure what's on the other side? The demo guy, like, why would you do that? Why? He went and demoed and he didn't even think about it for a minute. Just like, that's just so, wow, I can't even deal with that. As for the family, it doesn't sound like they were ready anyway, since there was still art on the wall the day before the contractor was actually expected. Surely they didn't expect to clear it all out the night before the side of the house was going to be torn off. To me, the damaged artwork part of the story is really partially the fault of the homeowners because they didn't really prepare in advance to protect their belongings and the master bedroom contents, since clearly the plan all along was to tear off the side of the house. So that room should have been 100% empty already, and all of the stuff moved into another area of the house to create the alternative sleeping situation. And because they were doing renovation and a house addition, which meant that they were going to be crawling with contractors for months. And so they would have had to move out of the master and go prepare someplace else to sleep. And like, they have to live during the months that part of the house is torn off. And so, or they have to move out. So either way, the family should have long since done the prep for that. It's like, come on. But still, all fault to the demo guy who was like, "Oh, it's a house. Let me just get out the chainsaw and start sawing the side of the house
Right.
off." Like
willy-nilly. I knocked on the door and no one answered, so I guess I'll just have to cut my way in.
I'll just cut a new door in the house. I know, right? Like, that's just like, welcome. This is like a perfect example of chaos that renovation can create. And, the guy that's in charge of demo, he's in charge of demo because he has less skills than the other people. And so they give him a sledgehammer and tell him to, whack the wall and stuff.
right?
He's in charge of knocking down. And so,
Make this wall go away.
yeah, like I can't even like I would have just lost my mind if I'd come home to that. I would have lost my mind. But there
Cou-
you go.
couple of great comments.
Okay.
May says, my exterior siding guy even warned me to take pictures off the wall as the installation would could rattle them.
Right? Like they're going to swing and pound and hammer and whack. And why would you not expect things to accidentally fall off the wall? Like if the contractor certainly should have prepared them for that. And the homeowners, if they cared about the piece of artwork that got destroyed, they should have thought about it in advance and moved that out of the way. Like I'm going to add to the house, which means they're going to open the house up in order to accomplish that. Like, come on, man. It seems to be like nobody was thinking, but mostly the guy with the saw went after the house when no one was home. Like, why didn't he immediately stop and call his boss and go, nobody's home? Can you call the people and ask them if it's okay? Like, why would you not take a minute
Yeah.
and check out what's going on? Like, oh my
Well,
gosh.
and M asked the very relevant question, what if he'd had the wrong address?
Oh, I don't even want to think about it. That would have
Right?
been, I mean,
Somebody's
a great
actually like
story,
lying in the bed in the bedroom when the
right? And
saw
here's,
starts coming through the wall.
oh my God, that's just so funny. Like, I can't even, can you, but think about it. You've been at work all day, you have no idea, and you pull into the driveway, and, maybe they're adding onto the back of the house. So you don't, masters are usually in the back of the house. And you come in the house and you eventually wander to the back bedroom and open the door of the master bedroom and go, what the hell? Like, how shocked would you be to come home to that? Like, that would just send me right over the edge. That was crazy. Great story. Thank you for sharing it. Illustrates how renovation impacts clutter and, creates clutter, creates chaos, and is super stressful. That's just the deal. Oh my gosh.
Okay, Jane has a tittle report. She says, I looked at options to replace the dining room table.
Oh,
I'd
okay.
I'd rather have something with storage. Some tables have storage underneath. With some tables with storage underneath were found. Before I decide how to proceed, though, I need to find something the current size or smaller. As
Mm,
I've bought furniture the past few years, I factor in being in a smaller place when I move to senior living.
that's
That
very smart.
that's
That's
good
such a
planning.
forward thinking,
Mm.
right? Because you are either going to have to give it up when you go to a smaller place or buy smaller now, right? And so, what a great idea. If you're going to replace the dining table anyway, replace it with your future smaller dining room in mind. And think about that in terms of the chairs as well, that, the chairs will fit easier and move around in a smaller place. And so don't look for chairs that are super large too. Great
Um,
thinking.
of the people in Driftwood's cautionary tale, Ginger says, these people are definitely those who do all the work the night before. And then
Clearly.
and then she puts a hand up and says, me. Yeah.
Well, but that to me is it takes longer to clear out a space than you think it's going to, right? Like try to imagine. So everything in that bedroom got covered in dust and debris and sheetrock crumbles and whatever else went flying when they started sawing, and it is now on every surface in the room. And so anybody that's thinking about a demo at all, it doesn't take much to go, gee, that's going to make kind of a mess. Perhaps everything in here should, I don't want it all to be covered in that mess. And so I have to dismantle the whole room. Like to me, it's the contractor's job to say, you have to get everything out of that room that you don't want covered in. Like, we can't work with your contents in the room because we're going to destroy the room. So they may, if they had done it, without, I mean, that's partially contractor's fault too, because I, you don't want that stuff going into the air conditioning unit, the uptake. You don't want that stuff spreading to other parts of the house, but over, with open doors. Like they would have come to seal off that room, hopefully, before they started, with plastic sheeting, before they started tearing the house down. And so that was just wrong in every possible way. And the contractor should have warned them, you need to get out of that room. We're going to tape it down and you're not going to be able to get into it ever again until we're done.
Right.
Like, you need to get it out. And so it's as if you have to move out of your own house, of the rooms that are going to be destroyed. And clearly nobody thought about that. Like, how could you not talk about, we're going to put an addition on the house here and we're going to tear off a corner of the house to do it, and then go on to have a conversation about what that impacts and what you got to get out of the way before we can start.
Yeah.
Like, somebody didn't have any very good communication about that at all, basically.
Okay, Light Sound says, I'm donating a huge desk and hutch I bought to run a career counseling business in my old house. I no longer need the set. I'm going to
Mm,
create a reading slash yoga space. I am motivated now that I can imagine a new purpose for the room and myself. Thanks to Clutter
right?
Fairy.
Yay, I'm so glad. That's great. And that idea is definitely like what you need in the room for a yoga room and reading is 100% different from what you had where you were using it for before. And so all that big furniture is just going to completely get in the way. And it's very easy to go, yeah, that hutch and have nothing to do with me doing yoga in here. So out it goes, right? You got to be able to get on the floor and stretch out, and you don't want anything in your way that you're bumping into, and you don't want anything restricting your free movement in the room. And so it's going to be a completely different level of furniture in there, and you can have a new vision about it. That's great. Come and tell us
Ginger
about it when you get it done.
Ginger reports, I've picked out furniture and flooring, started moving stuff from 8 living room table drawers. Those will go away into the utility closet. Then decided to switch the utility closet with the larger craft supply closet. Makes much more sense. It can store all the cleaning machines. Plus, my craft supplies will be easier to access.
That's good. And because you're going to touch your craft supplies, now's the time to thin the herd, right? If you're going to take it all out and move it to a new location, you probably haven't touched it all in a long time. So this is the time to be more judicious about, is this actually a craft supply that I'm going to need? Is this a craft that I'm going to do? Do I have too much of it? Has some of it died of old age? Is the glue dry? Is the is the plastic flaking? Is whatever? There's probably stuff in there that needs to go. So use that as an opportunity to filter it as well.
Yes. Okay, I think we should get on with our main topic.
Okay.
Clutter can interfere with our relationships, and complex relationships can make it harder to face our clutter. Managing our own stuff while navigating other people's attitudes about our stuff and theirs requires patience, compassion, and understanding on all sides. Today, we're going to examine the impact of clutter on relationships over time and offer strategies for bringing greater clarity and peace to our homes.
Relationships and clutter are inextricably linked, and how they change over time is complex. In early stages, differing views on clutter can create conflict, but as relationships age, the impact of clutter on the relationship can become more pronounced, especially if it's left unaddressed. Essentially, clutter can lead to stress, resentment, and even passive aggressive behavior, affecting communication and connection within the relationship. Clutter and how to manage it can become a weapon that couples use to hurt each other over and over. And it's sad that so many couples don't realize the damage they're doing to each other and their relationship by not actively processing and reaching a supportive agreement about how to deal with it together. In the beginning of a relationship, each of you have different preferences about clutter levels and about tidiness. Those differences can lead to arguments about cleaning, organizing, or even what items are going to be kept. Some couples initially overlook those clutter issues, hoping the other person will adjust to their preferences or vice versa. And this creates a buildup of unresolved issues. As the relationship progresses, if clutter issues aren't addressed, stress levels can increase, leading to resentment and frustration between the partners. The inability to effectively communicate about clutter can create a barrier between partners, making it difficult to resolve conflicts. Either of you may resort to passive aggressive behaviors like forgetting in air quotes to put things away, or leaving a mess as a way of expressing your frustration or anger, waiting for them to do something about it instead. In extreme cases, one of you might donate the other's things away without asking permission, and that truly violates their rights in the space. That's a level of betrayal that usually results in a step of hostilities and that person digging in their heels, refusing any level of cooperation after that. Ongoing clutter issues can fester and lead to deeply ingrained feelings of resentment. That only makes it harder to find common ground and to design a mutually acceptable solution. Living in an ever increasingly cluttered environment starts to negatively affect your mental health and your emotional well being. It can contribute to stress, anxiety, and even depression. Worst of all, clutter can impact the quality of the relationship. All that unresolved conflict can reduce your connection, intimacy, and your comfort in the home together. How can you turn this sinking ship of mutual pain and suffering around? I know you don't want clutter to be a permanent source of conflict and distress in your relationship, so what to do? First, you need to start with open and honest communication. You've likely stopped listening to each other long ago. It's time to discuss your feelings about clutter honestly and without blame. It's time to listen to each other's point of view and to set shared expectations about how to handle clutter together. This may be a struggle at first because you likely have long since stopped trusting each other around this issue. It'll take some effort to really listen without letting prior fights about it color what you hear from them. Both of you will have to make a concerted effort to hear clearly, understand the other's point of view, and to work towards a solution that works for both of you. This shared effort can help repair hurts and rebuild a sense of safety and trust between you. Don't forget that you can tap the resources of a therapist or a professional organizer as a neutral third party to help address the underlying causes and behaviors related to clutter and to negotiate a mutually acceptable solution for both of you. And in the meantime, each of you can take steps to manage your own belongings and your own habits to reduce clutter and create a more comfortable living environment. Of course, you all weighed in on our survey, and that's how we're going to explore this topic more today. Take it
So
away.
we we started asking about you and your clutter. The first survey question was, how have your ideas, attitudes, and behaviors around clutter changed over the course of your adult life? Do you have a higher or lower threshold for what counts as clutter? The majority of survey respondents expressed that their tolerance for clutter has decreased over time, but that sentiment wasn't universal. Some interesting answers. An anonymous respondent said, I have a higher threshold for living in a crowded space because the clutter crept in gradually over the years, giving me a higher tolerance for clutter. The
Hmm.
clutter feels comfortable and familiar, although logically, I understand that I will be more comfortable, safer, and get more accomplished without so much stuff.
We definitely get used to it over time as things just start to blend into the background. It starts to feel permanent and stuck there. It starts to feel normal in a way. We get used to it being there, and if our partners in the house don't do anything about it or object to it either, nothing much gets changed about it, and it kind of creeps up on you. Like it just slowly, you feel in, and you wake up 10 years later and you can't walk into a room that you used to be able to walk into. And so it definitely happens like that.
Millie says, I grew up in a messy house in which nothing was thrown away.
Mm,
When I grew up and got my own place, if my things were organized, I didn't think of them as clutter. I thought of them simply as my stuff. However, my stuff accumulated as I got married and had kids and tried to live a typical middle class life in a consumer driven world. I had to teach myself how to declutter because I didn't grow up in a family that taught me that skill. Otherwise, my house would have turned into the mess I grew up in.
mm.
Fast forward to being a retiree now, I live a more minimal existence than I've ever lived. I have a low threshold for what counts as clutter. The advances in technology have shifted my thinking, as has society's more casual attitudes about entertaining. I don't need much to live a happy life.
Isn't that a wonderful statement? That's a great shift in thinking. I'm glad that you were able to teach yourself how to declutter because you recognize from experience where you were headed without intervention. And if you think about it logically, you start buying things as soon as you have access to money. If you only buy and you never let anything go, eventually you're going to be buried in a tomb of your lifetime's worth of purchases. Millie saw that coming down the pike and she course corrected to live differently. And that required a great effort on her part because she wasn't trained with that skill in her own home. It was very much the opposite how she grew up. And so she was actually learning a completely new skill as an adult in order to change how she was living. So great, great job. You know, you did a great job, Millie, and I'm really proud of you for shifting your your living situation and your
Well,
skills around it.
and raising her self-awareness. Her,
Yes.
I, I want to repeat what struck me as the key statement. I had to teach myself how to declutter because I didn't grow up in a family that taught me that skill. I almost feel like that could be a mantra for people who are kind of new to the decluttering realm.
Mm-hmm.
You could say to yourself, I have to teach myself how to declutter because I didn't grow up in a family that taught me that skill. It's, it's okay. You're not bad, you're not broken, you're not dumb, you're not lazy.
Right. You just need to
This
learn
is
a new
just a
skill.
skill you need to learn.
Right, and recognizing that it's something that you can learn, that you can there's lots of resources out there, and whether or not you're an expert at it isn't the point. The point is that you can continuously add skill level over time and get better and better at it, and develop, the techniques that work for you and that resonate for you, and you can, even if your parents didn't teach you, that doesn't mean as an adult you can't learn a new skill. And so go out and learn, go forth and figure it out. Ask for support, do training, do classes, do whatever, because you can impact your life by learning the new skill.
Okay, Lise says, over the years, I realized that a lot of items I deem necessary or important really are not. Less stuff equals more time, space, time, and freedom. Currently, my threshold for clutter is very low. I would like to be a minimalist, but it is unrealistic. Releasing of sentimental items has improved. However, I still cannot let go of certain things, and I don't know why.
If you're letting go of some things and you're aware that many things aren't necessary after all, then keeping some things, even if you don't know why, is fine. If those things you find yourself keeping are bothering you, or you feel like you're keeping more than you want to live with, then it's time to explore more about explore the why of
Well,
those things that you're actually keeping. It might be time to start a conversation with a friend or a therapist about it to help you figure out your why and see if it still makes sense to you. It's all just a matter of volume, your threshold. If you think that you're still keeping more than you actually want to live with, then digging into the question that you have, why do I still keep these things? Why can I not let go of these things? Digging into that question will help you answer it and then also give you the basis on which to design an alternate solution. Like, we need to understand what it is that you feel attached to and why it's important before we can come up with the next best way to fix it, right? To come up with a solution. And so spending a little bit of time with someone talking about what those things mean to you and why you feel attached to them might illuminate a better way for you to have those feelings or to feel safe around letting stuff go. If we can refer you to another way to remember the person, or if we can solve a problem that you think it's going to solve another way, we can talk you through letting go of some of it because there's alternatives, because there's another solution. So focus on that.
well, and I also invite any member of our audience, if you're dealing with this, if you can say there are things that I still can't let go of and I don't know why, write to us about it. Send us an email, or in when you're answering one of our surveys, throw that in the future topics or ask us anything area, and we'll
Mm.
see if we can help you unpack it. If it's there's a particular category of stuff That's your problem. Um,
Let's talk about it.
Jules says, when I had a large young family, we had a lot of stuff, like all my friends. Every cupboard was stuffed full. A couple of house moves with the expense, time, and energy involved led me to think about simplifying lots of aspects. I am now mid 60 with parents early 90s. They have lots of stuff from living in the same home for 65 years.
Oh,
My dad has lost some sight and is unsteady on his feet, and the task of dealing with all the stuff is mine. I need to be patient, guide my dad with questions to let him come to a decision, and gently nudge him to let things go. It will test our relationship for sure.
actually, my advice for you and your dad is not to try decluttering so much as try to make his ability to move about the house safer. He has 65 years of muscle memory about living there, and it's actually helping him navigate in his world even as he's losing his sight. He's instinctively moving about his space because he knows exactly where everything is. So, changing it a lot at this point would take away some of his ability to cope as he loses his sight more. Rather than seriously disturb your relationship at this age, I would spend your time making sure he has clear pathways to get around and check for any trip and fall hazards in his space and make sure that that stuff is okay. And then I would pull out the old family photos and letters and keepsakes in the house and have him tell you the stories, identify the people in the photos, etc. He can tell you what's significant in the house and what isn't. Let him tell you what is valuable. I'm air quoting valuable at this point. Let him tell you what's valuable in the house and why he thinks so. Let him tell you what he thinks is worthy of your attention. That way, you'll hear all about the things that he thinks are precious, and conversely, what is therefore not precious by contrast. And that'll help you clearing out the house immensely after he passes. And he will love telling you the stories of the photos and the keepsakes in the house. Take notes, pay attention. It'll save you lots of struggle later. Truly, at his age and with his physical impairments, a big declutter is asking a lot, and it will create conflict between you emotionally as part of the process. But I'm more concerned about somebody that's lived in a house for 65 years. His body is navigating through that house on muscle memory alone. Like, he doesn't need to see to get around that house. He knows where everything is. He knows where the band-aids are. He knows where the motor oil is. He knows where his bathroom is. Like, he knows how many steps it is from the bed to the toilet, or from the, he knows the pathway to get to the kitchen. And so he's operating on very ingrained muscle memory at this point. And I've seen people taken out of their location after such a long time and move someplace new, and then the kids feel like he suddenly got worse. And it's like, yeah, because now he's in an environment where he has no muscle memory to help him navigate because it's all new, and it's way beyond, like, he's having to, it's usually that happens late in life or late in disease progression or in disability, and it's much harder to learn a new environment and remember and be able to get around. And so he's been there 65 years. The safest place for him is that house without a lot of physical changes in the layout of the room. So I would concentrate on removing what might trip him up now, rugs that might get in the way, places that are narrow to navigate for him, things that are heavy overhead that might easily fall down, anything that seems unstable. I would fix that. But I wouldn't massively change the layouts of the rooms or the locations of the furniture or anything like that, so that he still has that understanding of where everything is to help him, get through his last few years of life. And in the meantime, you guys spend some pleasant time talking about, here's his story about, here's the things from when he was in the army, or here's the pictures from the wedding, or, let him tell you what he thinks is what furniture or artwork, or where he's hiding the, where he's stashed what he thinks is a valuable coin collection or whatever. Let him tell you all of those things, and you just take notes, and then you can
Or
deal with the
or use
contents later.
or use the voice record function on your phone.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that way you can get information from him and also not be confused when you are going through stuff in the house and find something and you feel like, oh my gosh, this must be so precious. And it really wasn't, but you don't have any way of knowing that now. So
Right.
if you can get him to tell you, he knows the 10% of the stuff in the house that he thinks is super valuable and where he's hiding the silver and where he's stashed the, the coins or the guns or the artwork or the whatever. Let
The big
him,
pile of cash.
yeah, yeah, let him tell you about all that stuff. And then by contrast, the things that he didn't tell you about are the things that weren't important to him and were not at the top of his list. And so you don't have to feel as bad about letting them go because
Yeah.
you already know from talking to him what was important to him and what wasn't. That's my
Okay.
advice.
Um, I want to share one more comment before we get off of this particular question. Amanda said, your family isn't necessarily bad for not teaching you the decluttering skills. Mass production has only been around for a little while in the grand scheme of things. So
Mm,
many of us had parents and grandparents who owned much less than than people do today.
exponentially much less.
In
You're
that
right.
case, they didn't teach those skills because they didn't have those skills. They didn't require those skills, you know.
Right, right, right.
Caring for our stuff has changed a lot over the past few generations.
That is absolutely true. That's a very valid point. And, and we all have different degrees of ability around this, just like, some of us cook better than others, right? So it isn't their fault that they weren't particularly expert in organizing or decluttering and didn't teach you that skill. Maybe they weren't very good at it either. And so, they did what they were they taught, whatever. They gave you what they knew and you just recognized that you needed a skill that were not the teachers for, that there needed to be somebody else teaching you that skill.
All
It's
right,
okay.
let's go on to our second survey question.
Mm.
Do you find it easier or harder to declutter and organize as time goes by? Are there categories of stuff that get easier to manage? Are there categories that get harder to manage? The general consensus of the responses seem to be that decluttering in general has gotten easier over time, but that certain categories, especially sentimental items, are as difficult as ever or maybe even harder. Sunny says, the more I declutter, the harder it is because I got rid of the low-hanging fruit and what remains is harder to part with.
Mm.
Clothes are easier because I am retired. I don't tend to keep glass jars for flowers and rather use nice vases I own. As people in my life pass away, it is harder to let go of items they gave me, or that they owned.
Sonny, I would say you're doing fine. We all get attached to things from people who passed away. The trick is to limit that collection of dead people stuff to a few items each, not everything that you ever got from them. It's also true that we get rid of the low hanging fruit first because it's a higher volume to give away and it makes a lot of progress early on. But then you have to face the more challenging stuff and you can't get through it as fast. It seems not as satisfying as the volume of low hanging fruit and it's more troublesome to do it. But you can do it slower and as you make harder decisions. And even so, you'll get a rhythm going and even this part improves over time. It it is true that once you get all the easy decisions out, then you're left with the hard ones. And you get 50% of the stuff done and then the next 30% you're trying to get rid of takes 3 times as long as the first part. Well, yeah, because it's not all easy. But you will have been learning as you go and you will keep learning even as you go through the hard stuff. And so you will end up being better at it after you've talked through and sort of gotten started on the hard stuff and had the long involved conversations that you have to have in order to help you make a decision. And as you do that, you'll develop some parameters around the hard stuff, just like you had easy parameters around the easy stuff to let go of. You'll still end up with new choice parameters and be able to learn and make some choices a little quicker as time goes along.
We'll be right back. Hey, Pod Friends. Jen from the Halfway to Dead podcast here. Quick break for some real talk. Midlife is freaking hard, am I right? Are you ready to ditch the BS, flip the script, and finish this life strong? Of course you are. Join me to listen to real conversations that don't shy away from the hard, messy stuff. And yeah, we get a little woo-woo along the way. Let's hit the road on this midlife spiritual journey together. Halfway to Dead, served up with humor and heart. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, Sandra answered, easier. I'm wiser now when it comes to saying no, and I'm a much more mindful shopper. Even sentimental items are easier to declutter because my children told me they are not interested in most of them. I said the same thing to my mom. A harder to manage category nowadays would be digital files.
We all said it to our moms. Moms remember all the cuteness because they were the adults in the room when we were kids. We don't really remember much, so we're not attached to the stuff in the same way that they are. Our memories aren't really recording much during that time, so yeah, can't really help that. And moms always say more than they need to. Congrats on developing the mindful shopping muscle too. That's a good change in behavior that only helps you declutter and keep clutter under control as you go along. So um, that is a skill that many of the people in the audience would be super envious of, I think. Being mindful as you shop can
Definitely.
only prevent you from bringing home stuff you don't need.
Okay, Gabriella says both. It has become easier to declutter in the sense of my having developed decluttering muscle, and my home organization works fabulously. Since I have reduced my inventory so much, though by far not enough, now the items that are left are increasingly difficult to let go of.
Mm.
Pertinent categories: books, sentimental items, clothes.
So this we just touched on that earlier too, Gabriella. I mean, those categories probably each need their own conversation. So you're keeping them that you're in the more difficult categories and you're keeping them for different reasons. Each of them you're keeping for different reasons. And so having a conversation and exploration about books, why you're keeping the books, how you can filter the books is one conversation, and clothes is another conversation, and sentimental items is a third conversation because the rules won't apply across the board to all of them. And the reasons that you find them difficult to let go of is because your attachments to those categories are unique to each category. And so you have to give yourself the room to explore, why is it hard to let go of books? What do I think I'm going to miss if I let go of them? What is a reasonable volume versus what I actually have? How much of the books do I have to give away? And in order to, my goal is that it fits in the existing bookcases, or I get rid of two bookcases and it fits in the two that I kept, or, where are you trying to, where are you aiming, what are you aiming for there in relationship to the books? And then what is preventing you from doing that? And so exploring your attachment to the books, and is there another way for you to feel comfortable, and can you approach the books in a different method that's unique to the books? Like, book people are always like, oh God, giving up books, oh, and it takes a big shift around that. And so part of how I start people is, I'm not trying to get rid of all your books, so can you go and look for, can you reduce it by 5%? Can you go and look in the books categories and see if there's any that you would pull out right now as, I read it, I didn't like it, or I bought it but I'm never going to read it, or is there anything that you can pull out right now? And instead of zero, is there one or two or five or 10 that you would just pull out and be able to give up? And having that experience of, yeah, okay, you're talking about giving up books, and that terrifies me, and I shut down. But instead of shutting
Right.
down, I'm going to go stand in front of the bookcase and look along the spines and see if there's any books. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I didn't like that book.
I
Or,
have I have a good decluttering parameter for
and you made
books.
major shift around this because when we started, you had
Oh
so
yeah,
many books.
I probably maxed out at about 3,000 books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Um,
a lot.
but I have a new one. We've talked about my decluttering algorithm for books on
Mm,
several occasions, but I have a new one that I've brought into play recently, and that
mm.
is it physically possible for me to read this book?
Oh,
Meaning, okay, means a couple of things. One is if the print is really tiny and the lines, the lines of type are very close together, that's too hard for me. So what I've done when I find a book like that is I take a photograph of the cover and I throw the book into my donation box. There's no point in my keeping a book that I will be physically unable to read because my eyesight just isn't good enough anymore.
right, right,
So
right.
I take a picture of the book so that I can go look for an electronic version if the book exists in an electronic version,
Yeah.
because on the Kindle I can make the type as large as I need it, and
Right, right, right. You can
contrast is
adjust
high.
it.
Um, Contrast is an issue for me too. So old paperbacks where the paper's turned very brown
Mm,
and the ink has faded, so there's just not enough contrast between
between the two.
type and paper. Those have to go.
Oh, right.
And then another one is huge paperbacks. I in my most recent purge, I got rid of several huge paperbacks where the issue is I'm not going to read a book this heavy. My my
Right,
my shoulders can't take it. My elbows can't. My arms will get sore if I hold an 8 pound book and try and read for hours, you
right,
know?
right, right.
And so again, that's a candidate to go electronic on for me.
Yeah, like clearly this is too much, right?
And since I know that a lot of our audience are of a certain age, some of these disabilities may apply to a
To
few people in our
you, right?
audience. Yeah.
Right,
So
exactly.
think about the books that you just, take a look at them, and if you pick up the book and you realize I would be very uncomfortable trying to read this book, this would be unpleasant for me,
Yeah, for
let it
physical
go.
reasons,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Okay,
that's a great parameter.
let's go on. The third survey question was about the significant other. We said, think about the person in your life who's had the most impact on your decluttering and organizing, or the person whose own clutter creates most impact on you. This may be a spouse, partner, roommate, child, parent, another member of your household, or even someone outside your household or family. How have this person's ideas, attitudes, and behaviors around clutter, or the way their stuff affects you, changed over the course of your relationship? Pat says, the person whose impact is the highest is my husband. He tends to want to keep old magazines, computers, accessories like hard drives, mice, etc., and software. There are stacks of obsolete software that could never be used, and books about old operating systems, and user manuals for software that is not installed on any current computers. I keep getting told that it is my stuff that is taking up all the space and causing the piles of mess everywhere. Over the course of the relationship, the thing that has changed is that his stuff might be needed, while mine is too much quantity that takes up too much space and is making the bigger mess. That last sentence sounded kind of tongue in cheek,
Yes, a
like
little
a little
sarcastic.
sarcastic. Yeah.
Of course, he sees the possibility of the things that he collects because they're his collections. And he doesn't see the possibility of your collections because he isn't collecting those. In reality, a pile of old magazines and outdated hardware and software is just as useless now as anything else that's been stored past its time. And you two have been playing this tape between you of whose mess is it anyway for a long time. While you may have more stuff than him, he's contributing to the mess too. And it just may be in a smaller pile. It's not unusual for the spouse with the larger volume collections to be blamed for all the problems in the house unfairly. The truth is, everyone contributes and everyone needs to participate in the solutions. Laying all the blame on one person doesn't help anything get done, and it just strains the relationship. And I think it's very easy for, there's two people in the house, one of them has more than the other. And so it makes it super easy for the other one to go, see, it's your stuff, it's not my stuff. And that is blaming somebody unnecessarily and not creating an environment where a solution is possible. If you just assume that you're all good and they're the problem, and you keep saying that for 25 years, guess what? Nobody's listening to anybody anymore, and nobody's really interested in a solution. And so I think this is what I was talking about earlier. Like, you guys have been having that conversation for a long time and trying to have a real conversation where you're not just blaming each other. It's your stuff. No, it's your stuff. No, it's your stuff. No, it's your stuff. And making one person the bad and wrong one and the other one blame free is no. Like, there's nothing about that that's constructive, right? And so having a conversation where you actually talk about, I recognize that you want to keep these things, why? And let me talk about why I want to keep these things and why. And but we recognize that we have now filled the house and there's too much there. And we jointly want this to feel better. So how can we be respectful of each other and make some choices about what can be removed in the house to make it better? And you're going to have a hard time. It's going to be a struggle. It's possible, but everybody has to be on board. And the idea of, and he has to surrender that you are blameful, that it's all, you're completely responsible and he has no responsibility. That's just
Yeah.
ridiculous on the face of it.
It's so tough. The logical mind wants to say, wants to confront the other person and say, can you describe to me a situation in which this book about Word Perfect 3.0
Windows 98,
will be useful to you?
right? How is that going to be needed?
But
Please explain.
it's not a logical part of the other person's psyche that is trying to keep that book. It's a fearful part,
A fearful part and a sentimental part and
a nostalgic part.
yeah,
Um,
it may be keepsakes to him.
it could just be a perfectionist part. It's like
Mm,
I've got the manual on every version there's ever been, or something like that. You know?
right? Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the truth is, nobody needs to justify why they collect or why they find something interesting. He finds those things interesting. You find something else interesting. That isn't the point. The point isn't whether it's worthy to be of interest or not. The point is how that impacts, how the collection of it and storing it in the house impacts everybody's quality of life and peace of mind in the space. And so everybody's responsibility is for the collection to fit in the space comfortably, for the collection to reflect your ability to store it and not surrender living space to it or not surrendering as much living space to it. And so the idea that neither one of you can prove that your stuff is more worth collecting than the other person's, that is not the truth. The truth is, you both have a responsibility for whatever collections you have interest in, making fitting into the space allotted to them in reflection of what kind of space you live in and what kind of storage you have. And you may want there to be more storage for it than you actually have. And the only solution to that is go to someplace bigger.
Yeah.
But in truth, while you're where you're living, while you're living now, that those collections need to be right sized for the space and storage you're living in currently. And everybody's collections need to be right sized to the house.
Well, and you have to it can come down to the only thing you can do is model the behavior you want to see. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we have another survey response that
About that, yeah,
says
yeah,
that really well. So I'm going to come back to that. But
yeah.
a couple of good comments I want to share.
Okay.
M says it may be that the logical statement makes the other person feel exposed and trapped. At the moment, them's fighting words.
Right. True that.
Um,
Oh.
Ginger says, my stuff is good stuff, your stuff is crap.
Right. And
Yeah,
that's like, my collections are
yeah.
fabulous, yours are not. That's BS.
Connie asked to Ed and Gayle, did your parents argue about clutter? And I would say Occasionally, not a great deal.
And I would say my mother's solution was a hit and miss one. So she would, they would like, it was sort of, the house would devolve to a point, and then my mother would have one of those, I spent the whole day or I spent the whole weekend cleaning the house.
Yeah,
And she would reset it all back. But there was, I remember there being a long period of time between those resets.
yeah,
And I think that my dad, he didn't like it. but
yeah,
but he was also introvert, and he was introvert and passive aggressive, and so they did their basically their discussions and arguments quietly and without a lot of loud fanfare, but there was stuff going on. Yeah, I mean, they got divorced
yeah,
for a reason. But that I remember my mother laughing at me because she was an early riser, early to bed person. My dad was a night owl, and my mother would go to bed, and then she would wake up and she would see lights on in the house, and it would be me in my bedroom. And half the time she would come in and I would be in the closet, like organizing the closet or rearranging stuff in my bedroom at 1 o'clock in the morning, and she'd be like, "Why are you still up?" I'm like, "I'm cleaning, mother." Like, I reacted to that environment by managing my own room and my own stuff frequently.
yeah,
And that was, and then, she never let it go way off the deep end, and she would have okay, I gotta clean, and she would spend the whole day and it would all be set back and beautiful and dusted and wiped down and everything. But she would have to spend the whole day doing it, and and then we would start the cycle again, and in the meantime I'd be in the closet rearranging my closet at 1 o'clock in the morning. And if I had noticed and translated that, like, it took me a long time to get from cleaning my closet as a kid to being an organizer in my 40s. And so
yeah.
too bad I didn't see that pathway earlier in life.
My parents stayed married for 61 whole years.
They did.
And now that after mom passed away, we all started realizing that she was apparently the thing keeping dad from being hopelessly cluttered, because
Right.
now his apartment is kind of a wreck. Fortunately, it's
Right.
small.
He
That's the
can't do
saving
too much to
grace.
it.
He can
Oh,
only make so much
Dad.
of a mess of it. Okay, we need to go on. We're running out of time. Let's
Okay.
see. Kit answered. So, still talking about the other person, Kit says, spouse has begun to come around to the idea that intentional decluttering is both necessary and potentially emotionally uplifting.
Woo.
He's been working on his own stuff for more than a year now, to the point that it's become a casual routine behavior. He still holds tighter to stuff than I do, so that's still a struggle.
But here's an example of someone accepting his part of the decluttering that's needed in a shared space. And he's making an effort to work on his things and make his declutter decisions. That is really what benefits the relationship. He may be struggling, but he can ask for help, probably not from you, but an organizer would be a good idea at this point. Let a neutral third party support him and educate him on decluttering his stuff, and tell him I said, "Good job for doing it. I'm proud of him."
An anonymous respondent said, my husband doesn't like to get rid of things, but as I declutter my books, clothes, makeup drawer, shoes, sports equipment, and hobbies, I find him doing the same thing. Seeing my side of the closet, the simplified bookcase in the living room, and more space in the storage room must be inspiring him.
I love it when you can get someone decluttering by your example. Isn't that a great outcome? No nagging on your part, but decluttering started happening like by remote control. So, gotta love that. That's awesome. I'm glad he's responding that way.
Anne says, I lived either solo or with roommates until I married at age 49. Now I've been married 14 years, so I'd say my husband is the most influential clutter partner in my life. Always before with roommates, I was the messy one. Now I'm the less messy one. Pretty nice. I have more compassion for him because I know how it feels not to have the cleaning impulse and know how, and for others to be aggrieved. Also, he's got some mental health issues that are a factor, so that helps me not get as bugged. Also, we're not that different from each other, thank goodness.
Isn't that interesting that your role has switched from messier to less messy partner? That really gives you a good ability to be compassionate. Depending on his mental health issues, he can still learn some new behaviors though. He likely needs more gentle discussion about things and support in figuring out what helps him and what hinders him in managing his things. Maybe you can discuss what he truly can't do or learn to do and get some parameters around which you both can agree that you'll do it for him. Trade that with some way he can participate or support you in return. So it all doesn't fall on you. If you can declutter some for him, maybe he can vacuum or take over the dishes or the laundry. I think you can help him learn or take on things that are too hard for him in exchange for things that he can do for you. Be worth the negotiations for a better living space, and uh, then you don't have to accept a messier space that sounds like he's creating.
Okay, we're running out of time, but we started a few minutes late, so I'm going to ask the indulgence of our live audience if we go about 5 minutes over, because I want to also talk about question number 4 on our survey.
Mm.
If you could ask for one small change in someone else's behavior that would improve the state of your home, what would it be? Jessica says to complete actions all the way themselves instead of half doing them for me to finish.
Mm. So the first thing I thought in my head was, is your partner ADD? That might be affecting their attention span to stick with something. And if they're doing something that they don't like, they may abandon it before it's complete. You can direct them back to it gently or negotiate the finish line you want them to cross to consider it done. You may have to compromise here, and you may have to let them break it into 2 or 3 work slots to complete it. It does sound worthy of some communication and negotiation. They may intend to come back to something, but you finish it first. Just a consideration there.
Yeah, so don't be afraid to ask.
Have conversation around it.
Yeah. Selena says, I'd ask myself to get down to working on my hobbies and stop buying too many clothes just because they're inexpensive and high quality.
That would be a fun way to spend your time. Best way to get doing a hobby is to find a group of people who meet related to your hobby and get together to do it around each other. Do some Googling, search on Facebook. There's always others who do the hobby you do. So find a community and you're more likely to get hobbying. Trust me, it's a much more fun way to spend your time hanging out with people and doing that hobby together. And you can't be shopping while you're, in there doing something creative. So go find in a community for you, Selena, to support you.
Anita answered, that's difficult because it is who they are. Some of all of their things reflect their personalities. My family have a lot of creativity and artwork, which I feel has to stay. I think we have reached a point where my husband and I buy less for each other and enjoy time out
Mm-hmm.
instead. Although I have gotten him to go through bookshelves asking if I could get rid of any, and he usually piles up just my books. So a small change would be picking his own.
It's reasonable to declare we can't make decisions for others, only ourselves. So that's a valid request to make. We both make decisions on our own things. When you ask him to go through the bookshelf, be clear that he is to decide about his books and you'll be doing it for your books. That is not an unreasonable thing. You're not saying go to the bookshelf and choose for both of us. You're saying go to the bookshelf and look at your books and choose. And so I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Make it more clear and agree that you're going to do for your books, or do your books first and then send him over to the bookcase after you've already done your books and say, I've done my books. Now you go do yours.
Um, Ginger says, my husband doesn't like the mess I frequently have on the kitchen table. I don't like the mess he has around his chair. We no
Mm.
longer point these things out to each other.
It is lovely for you guys to accept each other's foibles, right? And there is some balance there, Ginger. I mean, it sounds like you have your space that he doesn't like, he has his space that you don't like, and you guys would, if you were living alone, you would do it differently. But it's one of the compromises you're making in your marriage to accept each have a spot that the other one doesn't like very much. And maybe you can negotiate. If you really want to make an improvement there, you guys could have a conversation about, okay, here's my space, and what about my space bothers you? What could I do to make that less distressing for you? Clearly you're not going to give up the space, you're not going to stop using it how you're using it, but there might be something about it that you could improve that so that he likes it a little better or feels more comfortable around it? And this brings me back to the story of the dining table, the client whose dining table and chairs, when the husband would come home from work, and if the chairs weren't lined up at the dining table, it really bothered him, and he would go line them up. And I would be standing in the house going, "Do you see the bomb that is in the rest of the house?" Like, but that wasn't what bothered him. What bothered him was that the chairs were not lined up straight when he came home from work and saw the dining table. That was an easy enough fix. She didn't have to worry about anything else in the house. That none of that bothered him. All she had to worry about was making the chairs straight before he came home. And so that was a super easy fix that calmed him down and made his entry into the home every night more comfortable and less triggering. So it's like there may be something about your space that you can change or fix. Instead of "don't be there," you can say, "but is there anything specifically, what specifically bothers you about it?" And maybe there's a way that you can modify how you are in that space to make it easier for him. And then you guys do it about his chair as well. What about that chair and his setup annoys you? And how could you shift that to see some improvement and how you react to it? Given that he's going to stay there and keep being and doing, what would make it be a little better for you? And you guys can make that little compromise for each other and maybe improve the space.
You know, as I was preparing content for this episode, I was also reading the book for next week, which we're going to talk about in a second.
Hmm.
And Dana K. White, I got curious. I hadn't read that far yet, and I wanted to see what she had to say about spouses. And the only thing I'm going to say about it at this point is the chapter about spouses is only 4 pages long. She didn't have a lot to say because there's only so much you can say about.
In a book, right?
Yeah. She mostly said that is you can't change other people
Yeah,
was
exactly.
the key thing. Um,
Yeah.
so let's talk about next week. We're
Okay.
going to be back next Tuesday, June 3rd at the usual time for the next installment of the Clutter Fairy Book Club. We're going to be discussing Dana K. White's Decluttering at the Speed of Life. Watch your email for an announcement and a link to the survey. We're going to have a survey on that one because we want
Hope
to
you've been
know.
reading. You better get to reading because
Yeah,
we want to talk about it.
it's only about 225 pages long, so if
It's an
you're
easy read.
you can get through that if you put your mind to it, right?
Go team, go.
Why don't you give us the title?
Okay, this week's title is Ask for the Help You Need. This week's assignment is to engage your spouse, partner, or another member of your family or household in an organizing task or project. Identify the room, area, decluttering project, or task for which you'd like help or at least cooperation. Start a conversation with the person whose assistance or input you're seeking. And as you discuss the task in question, set aside your judgment and blame and any history you may have with this project. Focus instead on things on which you can agree and on constructive ways to move forward, such as improving your communication about stuff, how you use your home, and your shared roles in caring for the space. Learning more about and accommodating one another's different organizing styles, tastes, and habits. Clearly communicating your needs and desires related to clutter, and organizing to the family member or housemate in question. So you want to focus on what you really need and want. And negotiating specific solutions to address the more troubling areas, the things that bother both of you the most. And frankly, that's a good place to start. The things that bother you both the most. You each are, like Ginger was saying, he's irritated about this thing, she's irritated about that thing, so they're not focused on the same thing. But there's probably things that both of you are bothered by, and those are perfect places to start because you both are motivated in that place to get something, to make some change happen. And so worth it to focus on that. Uh, go for it. Give it a shot and come back and tell us how it went. I hope that you don't I hope that you don't get it. We're not trying to get you into arguments with your spouse. So let's try to be super compassionate and kind while you're doing this and see if you can't make some headway.
If you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love for you to join us live. To get notifications about upcoming events, we invite you to join the meetup group by visiting cfhou.com/meetup. You can also follow us on Facebook by visiting cfhou.com/Facebook, or join our mailing list by visiting cfhou.com/subscribe. We love to hear from you, so please keep your questions, comments, and topic suggestions coming on Facebook, YouTube, or anywhere that you find us. You can always reach us through our website at clutterfairyhouston.com.
Thanks everybody for watching. I hope that you go and like the episode, subscribe to our channel. We would love for our subscriber base to get bigger so that you guys can keep us afloat and doing our thing. So and I hope that you have started the book, that you're reading the book so that we can talk about it next week. It is really a fairly straightforward and easy read. She has an easy writing style and she's describing her own situation, her own experience of learning to declutter and how she changed her own processes in her own life around that. And so it's a very easy, she's telling a story about herself. She's talking about her own journey, and it's a very easy,
Lots
it's a
of
very easy book to read.
lots of honest, self-deprecating humor.
Yeah,
It's a pretty
yeah.
funny book, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of humor in her
She has
style.
some humor, and she has no problem making fun of herself and talking about what it was like before. And so I think that you will relate to her and relate to her situation and how she managed, and it's worth the read. So I hope you're
And
going to participate next week.
we'll see you next week.
We'll see ya. Bye.
Bye.